All right, I think we're back on track. Ladies and gentlemen, in a few moments, on the screen you will have a video from Stockwell Day. At the end of the video, you'll see me again and you'll see Mr. Day. So when you're ready at the back there, hit the play button and we're on our way. Thank you all for your patience.
Members of the public and members of this House, including myself, were shocked when the member for Chilliwack North brought an organization to this building actively promoting that, quote, homosexuality is immoral and morally wrong. That's from ARPA's own executive director, from their own material that they brought to the legislature. They also believe that, quote, homosexuality and transgenderism are disordered. They are an organization that wants to end the federal ban on the documented harmful and sinister practice of conversion therapy. And they are actively lobbying MLAs in this building to restrict abortion access for women. I find it astounding, shocking, and hurtful that these issues are being brought back into this building by the opposition and are even a matter of debate.
But I draw the line when religion is used as a shield for hatred. I will call out hatred every single time, and this is one of those times. ARPA has said, and I quote, as a Christian advocacy organization that adheres to the truths we believe are found in God's Word, it is not inconsistent then for us to state that we believe homosexuality is immoral. They also say, and I quote, ARPA believes homosexuality and transgenderism are disordered. Honorable Speaker, there is nothing disordered about being gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, or queer. What is disordered is believing that some British Columbians are less worthy of dignity and respect because of who they are or who they love. That is not faith, that is prejudice. And prejudice, when cloaked in religious language, does not become righteous. It remains harmful, it remains hateful, and it has no place in the values of our province.
When groups such as ARPA speak in opposition to human rights and basic health care, it can have immensely negative impacts on trans and non-binary youth and their families. Effectively, it compounds the prejudice, the stigma, discrimination, and violence they already face. We must recognize the very real human harm caused by beliefs such as the ones perpetrated by ARPA that reinforce stigma and fuel discrimination. When an organization denies the humanity of others, it crosses a line and becomes a matter of public safety and public harm. A compassionate society cannot remain silent while harmful rhetoric seeks to erase the reality of others. These views are outdated, dangerous, and do not uplift or unite us. They only divide us.
I met a young woman who told me she was out with her girlfriend for a night out on the town, of course minding her own business, and she got yelled at and intimidated by a group of people on the street. Why? Because she was holding her partner's hand. That meant that their safety was at risk. That was heartbreaking to hear, but sadly, stories like this happen all the time. For some reason, some people just can't let others live the way that they want. And that's who ARPA is, and the people who support them are. They're the harassers in that story.
In our government, we believe in lifting people up, strengthening everybody's ability to have a life of their choosing. Our government is not open to suggestions by those who advocate repression of specific groups of people.
We do have to condemn the people that show up here that have hateful views, that want to practice intolerance and lobby for policy changes to stop people from making decisions for themselves. That's the crux of the issue, nothing else. I love people equally. I don't stand for any discrimination of a particular group because of their views, and especially legislating that into policy.
Can't believe I spent 25 years in BC. I should have worked harder. Anyway, look, we're going to be joined. I think can I get a thumbs up from the sound desk? We're going to be able to, yes, we are going to be able to be joined by Stockwell Day. Shortly we'll be entering into the panel discussion of the excellent questions you've given us, but first we are going to we're going to hear from Stockwell Day. I think we all know that in his long political career in both the Alberta legislature and later in the extraordinary pressure cooker world of Parliament, first as a Reform MP and then as leader of the combined Reform Alliance opposition, Stockwell Day has never wavered from his commitment to Christ. He is a man of principle. He has modeled integrity and, as a Christian brother, fortified and encouraged others in the often heartless world of politics. Also, for some years during the Stephen Harper ministry, he set a new high bar for others as Canada's Minister of Foreign Affairs. Sadly, neither his character nor his abilities protected Stockwell Day from bitter, often puerile, personal abuse. He was consistently attacked for his Christian beliefs, leading many Christians to wonder if they were welcome in government at all. And indeed, you have just seen on the screen some indication that Christians are not welcome in government. After leaving government, Stockwell Day started a consulting agency, Stockwell Day Connex Limited, serving clients and organizations globally in the private and public domains. He is a regular media commentator and speaker known nationally and internationally. And in today's presentation, Stockwell Day explores the growing tension between pressure and persecution, and raises the uncomfortable question of whether Christians have become too compliant. Civility is not the same thing as courage. Listen. When they do that on Fox News, it just comes in like that. So,
you're live, Stockwell.
Do we have the video?
Yes, okay. Are we on? Can you hear me?
Okay, well, let's go right to...
Thanks, Nigel. I don't know if we're having a little interference. This is a live broadcast.
Can I sit down?
Tell me if you can hear me, Nigel, if you and the good folks there can hear me.
Oh, you're coming through 5 on 5.
All right. You want me to start rolling?
Yes.
What have you got for us?
Okay. Well, Nigel, thank you for your overly gracious words. I hope nobody thinks that I am a paragon of perfection. I certainly am not. I think by the grace of God, I have not faltered in terms of my belief and my belief and relationship with Jesus Christ in the years since I have committed my life to him. But have I lived perfectly? Well, if my wife is watching and listening and I tried to get away and explain all of my perfection to you, there might be an interruption or two. But I thank you for your gracious words. And you know what they say about politicians, especially recovering politicians. Anytime somebody says something nice about us, we will gratefully receive it. So thank you, and Nigel, thank you for your years of journalism, and I think being a stellar example to not just the listening and watching public, but to journalists everywhere, of the ability to be able to take a subject, debate it on its merits, without losing your mind, and in most cases, without losing your emotions. And it's a trait that we need to see really deliberated, and we need to see far more in the public square. I'd like to start, if I can, with a land acknowledgement that I gave when I was on Parliament Hill just earlier, a few days ago, and speaking to a group of members of Parliament. And so I'd like to acknowledge that we are on the land that was created by God himself in the account that was given in Genesis, and that God has never ceded that land. It is there for our stewardship, all of our stewardship, and also for us to be respectful, kind, and loving to one another. So that is the acknowledgement. I had a First Nation friend, a chief, one time tell me, he said, you know, Stockwell, Jesus' name is in the New Testament, and he's actually named as a chief in the New Testament. And I said, well, chief, I never knew that. Tell me about that. And he said, yes. And he quoted to me from Ephesians chapter 2, verse 20, where it says that we are built on a foundation of Jesus, who is chief cornerstone. So he referred to him as chief cornerstone, and I'll leave that thought with you. In terms of being a cornerstone, first I want to say what a great what a great seminar, what a great thing that is going on right now, put on by JoJo and others. I understand that despite the big snowstorm in Ottawa and in other parts, you've got about 400 people there live and about 1,200 or so on stream. So that's tremendous. Great work on everybody's part there. And what a lineup of speakers you've had. I know and listen regularly to some, if not all of this. I know Fatine probably could lead the country in knowing what it's all about to have the dogs let loose on her, as she was, as the title of her presentation indicated. And what an honor to have Pastor Lim. I mean, when we even try, any of us, to talk about persecution or even pressure, as Nigel has said, you know what? I just sort of fade away in embarrassment when I think what I have gone through as compared to Pastor Lim. I can't imagine the waves of horror and shock when somebody, you're in jail in North Korea and somebody tells you you're going to be here for life, and you have every reason to believe that. And so we thank you for Pastor Lim, what he had to share. Luke out there in Quebec, oh, what a, you know, the things he has done and said, and the things he has stood up when Quebec leads in many ways, as you know, la belle province, and unfortunately they lead in areas, if not pressure, of outright persecution when it comes to the statement of religious beliefs. And Dr. Moeller, wow, with his the breadth of his experience and the number of churches that he is responsible for, and how he has consistently maintained that solid message, again, would be an example of how to speak up in the public arena. And I'm really looking forward to what JoJo says. And I like the thought of, you know, some of us think we just have to sort of grit our teeth and try and survive. And he's telling us how to thrive, not just survive, and how to have important conversations. Well, somebody who had important conversations and challenges us all, and there are many in this last century, but Dietrich Bonhoeffer, for those of you who may be familiar with him, really tried to rally in Germany, tried to rally the church to the ongoing incremental, it didn't happen overnight, but the incremental gains made by the Third Reich, made by Hitler and his Nazi regime in daily, bit by bit, one step at a time, taking away freedom to speak, freedom of expression. And his concern all of his life, and those of you who may not be aware, he was threatened many times. He was arrested. He was imprisoned, and he was murdered. He was killed. He was assassinated by the Nazis. I think something like 2 weeks before the war came to an end. Gave his life, never stopped speaking up. He said something interesting. He said that what we have to battle more than anything, he said, stupidity is more the enemy of the good even than malice. And he talked about malice, he talked about evil. Those are things that we can fight. But stupidity is something that's very hard to deal with. And he said that in a way, when you read the fuller explanation, it wasn't being demeaning. He wasn't calling people stupid, but he said we can be stupid if we are not doing the things we should be doing. And he said that he found that to be one of his great frustrations in trying to get a message to the church, and a message which, shockingly and failingly, certainly to our Jewish friends and actually to civilization itself, just the lack of, as we look back with heartbreak and I would say with shame on, honestly, and I say this with love, the stupidity of people to think that they could buy time, that they could have more favor by being compliant rather than speaking up. And so we say, how do we get here? How does an intelligent, informed, educated society largely allow the taking away of freedoms, some of those basic freedoms, and get to the place where they're actually not just not speaking up against the existing regime, but in fact, becoming part of it? And one thing that we can do is we can rage against evil. And there is a time, I think, for righteous anger. There's no question about that. But in taking our message, and as Jojo says, in having conversations, if we are all rage, we are not going to regain the ground that we have lost. We know we live in a time right now where the majority of debate or discussion is based on feelings, not on fact. And probably the greatest sin you could commit today in the eyes, certainly of mainstream media, is to say something that could be deemed as hateful. And we are to avoid hate, of course, but when our discourse becomes defined as hateful, awful things happen to us in terms of we can get arrested, all kinds of things happen. So we're living in a fear. We live in the fear of being called hateful when we raise a point of view that is different than what somebody else has. And I'm telling you, this comes from our, well, I'm going to touch on this, the high points of the cultural institutions of our society, the quick release of being called hateful. And the irony is it doesn't exist as profoundly among most of the people that we deal with who have different points of view. I often have the honor of speaking in synagogues, actually spoken in Sikh temples. And speaking at a synagogue, let me give you an example of this. One of the times I was speaking in a synagogue in Canada, I'd been invited there, and I met with the rabbis beforehand. And before I went out onto the platform, the chief rabbi among them said, you know, Mr. Day, we have some differences of theology. I said, yes, Rabbi, I certainly understand that. He said, you know, we do not even agree on who is the Messiah. And I said, Rabbi, I'm aware of that. I didn't know if the rabbi thought I was going to go and give a evangelical exposition on the rabbi and maybe perhaps have some kind of altar call, which was not what I was asked to do there. And I said, yes, Rabbi, I agree. We don't even agree on that. And he said, do you know what I think? He said, I think when Messiah comes, he will tell us who was right and who was wrong. And, you know, I said, Rabbi, I can deal with that. That is fine. But here's an example of two individuals, this rabbi and myself, with a profound disagreement on the most essential part of our respective faiths, and yet we could link arms together and work together on something to the benefit of all society. And mainstream media and the activist groups who they feel it is their calling to activate people, to get people thinking they're being attacked and being hated, And they're doing more these days, these activist groups, to harm social discourse and to sow the seeds of hate, in fact, in the population, than the people that we have differences with sometimes. I was very honored not that long ago to be invited by the Dalai Lama to join a small group of people from around the world, all different backgrounds and religions, to meet with him and his cabinet in exile in northern India. And he wanted a 3-day strategic meeting where we would bring to him, we would gather, we'd have discussion, we'd bring to him different approaches that we thought in terms of what he has to deal with in dealing with China vis-a-vis Tibet. I have to say, I believe they've largely lost that battle tragically. However, there we were, people of all different walks of life, and he was asking for our input. And as I was invited to sit up on the stage with His Holiness, it was a very I was very honored to be there. And I started my remarks by saying, here I am in the midst of a very different religion than mine. And here I am with the leader of that religion. And I said, we have profound differences. I said, I believe Jesus Christ is the Lord of the universe. The Dalai Lama does not believe that, but he knows I don't hate him. And I know he doesn't hate me. And many of his followers are there. There was no hatred in the room. There was a recognition that we had a very strong difference of view in terms of the most fundamental aspect of our belief, but we could still link arms and work together on projects for the good of humanity. This is something that mainstream media and the activist groups don't understand. They want to breed anger and hate between the various groups, and we need to push beyond that and still declare the truth, speak the truth in love. How do we get to the point where we are so overwhelmed and so confounded in terms of a Christian worldview no longer even really existing? That's something that the Christian worldview is out there. It is not the predominant worldview. Many people will be glad with that. I want to reflect for a few minutes on Karl Marx. And when I talk about Marx to the younger generation or even some of the older ones, I'm not talking about the Marx brothers here. I'm not talking about Groucho. I'm talking about Karl Marx and his writings as we got to the end of the 1800s. And his writings on communists, and they had a profound effect. Now, he wasn't the only person who wrote on these things. Others did also. But I want to use him as an example because Karl Marx said, first and foremost, if you're going to have a successful society, a cohesive society, you must you have to outlaw God. You cannot have not just a belief in God, you cannot even have people allowed to be able to expound on the possibility that there is God. And that is why, of course, any communist country, without hesitation, from then on until today, that's one of its first and most important predominant factors. You have to outlaw God, the propagation of religion. Interesting to see in December of last year, as the government moved, they floated a trial balloon through the finance committee in terms of seeing if they could take away the charitable status of get this, organizations that promote religion. Wonder where they got that idea. This is number one for him. And number two, of course, was that family is more or less a man-made construct and was only constructed to control people. So we have to dismantle the concept of families. The state needs to take on more and more the role of the family. That was a key Marxist principle. And then if you don't have family, you don't have the need for family, you certainly don't have the need for a private home. You certainly don't have the need for private property. If you don't have the need for private property and the work that it takes individually and even entrepreneurial to gain resources to purchase property, then you know what? You really don't need to be able to make those choices. Government will largely make the choices for you in terms of where you should work and how you should do it, and government should decide what that should look like. And of course, these type of moves are going to be seen as revolutionary. So this is not going to be able to be done peacefully. It has to be done violently. There will be clashes. There will be clashes on the street if you're going to achieve this. And it's going to take that for people to realize that really what is best for society, according to Marx, is for a few highly intelligent elites to basically control everything. Technocrats who are seen as high experts in their field, and the necessity, democracy is just not a necessity, as long as we have a few of the elites, super intelligent people. And Now, Karl Marx is gone. Of course, Lenin, and I'm not talking about John, Lenin put those principles into what was really the first foundational nation, really espousing and living up to communist standards. And Stalin perfected it right to the T. He made sure that people literally would be killed. People who were expositors of a religious belief, churches had to be shut down. Family had to be radically altered. It had to come under the heavy stomping foot of the state. Private property, of course, was abolished, and the elites were going to take control. And then the other aspect was anybody opposing the revolution had to be killed, literally killed, as you know, and it was quite easily and done widespread by the thousands, if not millions, with the forces of government going into a town or going into an arena somewhere. And anybody who was identified as opposing this would literally be shot in the streets. Other regimes preferred hanging, but you only have to shoot or hang a few people. Everybody else falls into line. These were put into place. And elites running everything, elites deciding how the economy would be put into place and how it would be enforced. Well, eventually, after 70 years, and by the way, to enforce this, the premise of violence is part of the revolution. You have to have violence in the streets, according to those who are Marxists in their thinking. Now, I can't blame that entirely on Karl Marx. Robespierre before him during the French Revolution, and we're all quite familiar with the thousands, they estimate 30,000 people within a year were literally beheaded in the public square, thousands and thousands more killed in other ways, very public. And Robespierre talked about that, he even wrote about that. He talked about the virtue of terror, the virtue of terror. So why would it be a virtue? It in their minds, not just Robespierre, but Marx and other communists, in their minds, they're creating the perfect state. They're creating the perfect state for human beings. They're creating a civilization that will be perfect and that will take away all problems. Therefore, if somebody is opposing that, they're actually harming the state. They are seen as harmful. And the things they're saying are going to be deemed hurtful, and therefore those people have to be eliminated. And you can see as gradually we move into the late 1800s and then into the 1900s, and as universities became more widespread, more and more the overwhelming prevailing worldview became culturally Marxist. Marx's name wasn't there anymore, but it became culturally Marxist. And it shouldn't be a surprise when these things, and it happened incrementally, this never happens overnight, but we are at the place now where most people will concede, and even those who head up universities will concede. You cannot, in most cases, you cannot raise the possibility of God and God having some kind of bearing in terms of determining how civilizations go. You have to alter what is seen as a family. Family is an evil construct that has to be altered. And if you don't need the family, what's the big, why are people so excited about private property and pursuing the way that you think is right to acquire the resources within the law to gain that property? All of these aspects of Marxism are fed into our culture today. It's taken decades to develop, but they are the prevailing view. And then certainly anybody who opposes this must be canceled, not by shooting. You generally can't do that in a democracy. You can't in a university. The profs just can't, or the president can't just shoot somebody. You can, however, cancel people. They must be canceled if they're bringing a view that is different than yours. When I was on national television on CBC and I was asked the question, is Canada not systemically racist? I said, you know what? Canada has some racist goons. Unfortunately, every country does. But Canada, systemically woven through our entire system, no, we are not. We are not systemically racist. Are we picked on as kids in high school? Yes, we get picked on, and it's never fun. It's never tragic. Whether you're picked on for your race, whether you're picked on for how you look. I'm not crying the blues here, but I know growing up as one of the only kids in high school with thick glasses and braces, and my friends telling me, "You're never going to get a girl. No girl's going to want to date you." It seems to me that's trivial compared to what other people have gone through. But each of us, many of us, as a matter of fact, I can't think of anybody who hasn't gone through that type of bullying at high school. Does that mean we are a systemically racist country? No, it does not. Should we always be on guard against racism? Yes, we should. But you get eliminated. You get eliminated from the public square. There are other ways to do it. You get canceled. And that has been a prevailing threat on the advancement of freedom of speech, and that's through our educational institutions. Many corporations have taken on through the extremes of wokeism have taken that on, and people just do what has to be done to get by. So in the educational, now add something else here. The people who have a Christian faith will talk about the fact that in the book of Proverbs, which was written by the wisest king of the time, there's a statement there that says, if you raise up a child in the way they should go, then when they are old, they will not depart from it. And many Christians bemoan the fact that they think they're raising their kids in the right way, and yet their kids are to a huge extent adopting a worldview that is culturally Marxist and not one that is foundationally Christian. And they say, how did that happen? But even Jesus gave us the warning. Luke records in the 6th chapter of Luke, in the 40th verse, he said the student, depending what version you look at, the student will become like his teacher. In our school systems, public or private, the vast majority of teachers are wonderful people. They truly are. If they're in a public system where, according to culturally Marxism, the expression, biblical or theological expressions have been removed, you can't declare the reality of God, and families have to be reconstructed. And in fact, you don't need all these things like private business and private property. And so we put kids through, let's say, at least 12 years of that. And then we send them to university for another 4 years at the top experts in the field. And so when people say to me, people of faith say to me, well, what about the promises that we had if we raise up a child in the way we go? I say, well, you did. You raised up the child. I say this with respect and kindness, in an arena where for 95% of the time that they are listening and being taught things, they're in an arena which is espousing culturally Marxist point of view. So why are you surprised after 16 years of that a child comes out saying God is just not relevant? And the family really isn't the way it should be. Something for you as people of faith to pray about as you're thinking and looking about how and where to educate your kids. Just please, all I'm asking is keep that in mind. And now there's some good news here in the book of Exodus. We're told, obviously, to honor our fathers and our mothers. Deuteronomy 6. This is the word going out to not just the Jewish people, but this is intended for all people. If you follow these principles, you will enjoy the benefits of them. In the 6th chapter of Deuteronomy, verses 6 and 7, it says to parents, there's only 4 times you have to instruct your kids in terms of the right way, in terms of God's way. And so, are you ready for that? There's only 4 times you have to do it every day. It says, in your house, in your going out, in your coming in, and in your rising up and in your lying down. So when you're getting up at the start of the day, when you're finishing the end of the day, when you're going back and forth with your kids, you should be reflecting by your words and by your life what these principles are. That, in fact, those are the principles, if taught on that basis, that they will tend to carry with them. They'll come to a place in their life, excuse me, where they will have to decide in a personal way if they're accepting these are principles coming from a living and loving God. But this is the instruction that we're given to share and present to our kids. And we have largely, let's face it, folks, I'm not trying to put anybody down. We have largely abandoned that level of intensity, and they have faced culturally Marxist principles. And so I just was dealing with and doing some work at a cultural institute in the United States, and they are also do a lot of work with the Barnea Group, who does polling on this. And so it's no surprise that kids coming from families of faith, so-called Christian homes, and even other faith homes, could be Jewish, could be Islamic, but kids coming from those homes, going into first-year university, by Thanksgiving of the first year, kids coming from so-called Christian homes are abandoning their faith. Why? Because they've been brought up with culturally Marxist principles, and now they're going into an arena where it's culturally Marxist principles, and they just come to the conclusion, most of them, not all, that God is just not relevant. And then the other things flow from that. And so this is why we need to have institutions like the one that you're hearing about today and this weekend, the Cornerstone Institute, getting the very cornerstone of these values, learning and understanding them. We're told, Paul writes a letter to the church in Rome, and he says in the 12th chapter there in the second verse, do not be conformed. Don't be conformed to the thinking, to the mindset of the world. Be transformed. Be transformed in your mind by principles that are biblically sound and biblically placed. That is the difference. That's how we are able to truly transform society. If our own minds are transformed, we'll have transforming effects. It says in Romans, and again, Paul writes, and he's right in the center of scholarly Rome. He says, he's looking around society there. He said, professing themselves to be wise, which is what I guess all of us do, but certainly the university culturally Marxist word is professing themselves to be wise, they became fools. Now that's a tall order. That's a strong statement. So how do you become fools? So I'm just going to take one example, and there may be agreement or not on this one. You pick the example that's most relevant to you. But on the whole issue of transgender and what that means, and I want to say right from the start that I believe a principled policy, and it's one of some of the parties in Canada. I'm not going to make this political. It is understood that adults have the right to go the way they wish when it comes to how they want to identify. They have that right. We actually respect that right. And as much as I might agree or disagree with somebody on the choice that they might make, still love them. They have that right. But when it comes to children, clearly the biblical view is parents should be the one, as I've just gone over, that should have the right. So I'm using this as an example of where I think we've become fools on this, and it's because we're afraid of being called hateful if we happen to disagree with this. But this idea, which is so recent in the span of human existence, whether you think the world is 10,000 years old, 10 million, or 10 billion, in the span of human existence, this idea that males can become females had never been heard of, maybe practiced in certain ways, never been proposed as the major prevailing view, and yet we're living in that, or almost living that. This idea, I think Bonhoeffer didn't even see that coming, but he says, we've become a little bit stupid, and we're afraid to raise the issue that it took years for this to develop, but nobody really spoke against it, and so we've come to that place, and we're told that if you believe in nothing, in terms of the existence of God or not, then you will tend to believe in anything. And so here we believe that, XX and XY chromosomes don't exist. I'm not going to get into the whole detail of it, but it's the fear of speaking up that has mainly held churches, just as in the 30s, late 30s and early 40s. The fear of speaking up, the thought that, we'll just go along to get along and we're not going to upset anybody, and the fear of being called a hater. Nobody wants to be called a hater, but cultural Marxism has come to the place of being able to say if you have a difference of point of view with somebody, you must hate them, especially if it's not the prevailing view. And so pastors have largely, been quiet on that issue. They haven't sounded the trumpet in most cases about that issue. So people out there are not hearing, as it says, and the prophets say, are not hearing that trumpet sound. Nothing's breaking through. And finally, it's taken this week. Now, I think I'm not going to be prophetic here. If I say I'm a prophet and it doesn't come true, then you get to stone me. So I'm going to be predictive here, but I think we may have finally seen a tilting point. You can check out the case of Fox Varian, 16-year-old woman when she was 16, was advised wrongly that she should go through a double mastectomy, have her breast amputated. She took that to court, as you know, and you may have read about this, and the court has ruled in her favor that she was improperly advised, that she was not properly counseled. In fact, she was forced, and they have flipped it around. And because of that, all of a sudden, in a week, the American Medical Association, for instance, the Association of Plastic Surgeons, other medical associations have come out saying, you know what? We should not be doing this to kids, to people under 19 years old. The UK has established that a long time ago. Most Scandinavian countries have also. Canada has not, largely, other than the amazing Premier Daniel Smith. And so having seen that turn around, I think now finally we may see some of this start to turn. I don't know for sure, but we may. And sadly, it's not because churches haven't lovingly spoken about it. It's the courts and it's doctors and psychologists fearing getting sued that has done it. But there's been a turnaround, and I'm hoping it will be ongoing, and that we'll now have the ability to really analyze this from a proper point of view without being terrified. We're told in the book of Isaiah that Isaiah 57, chapter 5, and I know there's people here who are people of faith, and so I'm sharing this. Please check these scriptures out and think about them. But it says we inflame ourselves with idols. We inflame ourselves with idols, and in doing so, we slay our children in the process. And in the hidden valleys and in the rocks, that's quite an indictment. But the things that we're doing and allowing to kids, because we inflame ourselves with these false idols of belief, is really significant. And there's in the second chapter of Kings, when it's talking about society at the time, it talks about images, images being raised in secret places, images being taught and shared in secret. And Psalm 106, verse 20, a remarkable thing. It says, people get to the place where they exchange the glory of God for the image of a bull. The image of a bull, which was the image of, they say fertility, but it was all to do with sexuality. And you know the irony there? As society did that, exchanged the love of God for images of a bull, false images, they didn't even get the bull. They just got the image. And that's happening, folks. We are exchanging, we are on the internet, we are selling out to images that are not based on a biblical worldview. And it's very important that we do start these conversations, as Jojo has said, and we need to be rising up and speaking about these things. The number one thing, and I close with this, we could get into great discussions on all of the theological things and all of the very wise ways to talk to people about this. But first of all, folks, I just want to say, there's a scripture that says that things will turn around as long as we will abandon our wicked ways, whatever we're doing, whether it's on the internet or whatever. But for people of faith to be coming to God and establishing what Jesus did, which was daily. It says, and we're told in scripture in Luke chapter 5 and verse 16, we're told that Jesus got up early in the morning. Now, some people in the media that are listening are just going to diminish this, but folks, if you are not daily starting your day in a meaningful time in prayer, and as it says in Hebrews chapter 5, verse 7, really crying out to God and saying, God, help me to see things your way. Help me to love people the way you love them. Folks, that is the number one conversation. We're going to hear about conversations. If you're not doing that in a daily way, folks, this is the way we start the day, to start the reversal in our societies, to trust the one who said to trust me, walk closely according to those teachings, and we will see society turn back around. Thank you so much for your kind attention today.
A lot of truth in what Mr. Day has just said there. Thank you very much, Stock. If you're still in radio contact, that is a very insightful analysis.